My name is Bunty Chand, and I work for the Asia Society in India. And we have, I think, a wonderfully interesting program this evening on media and democracy. And we have with us, of course, which is why you're all here, Rajdeep Sardesai, who has come all the way from Delhi, Shaina NC, who has also come all the way from Delhi, and Milind, Deora, and Naresh Fernandes. And before I begin, I want to say a big thank you to Rupa Publications for their support in organizing this program. And today's discussion will focus on the changing role of media and how it's being used amidst what Rajdeep calls an exciting and politically contentious time in India. And I think this spurred his new book, which is what we're talking about today, and which is for sale outside, and which he'll be ready to sign after the program, Newsman, Tracking India in the Modi Era. And to quote an observation from the book, Rajdeep says, "To be a newsman in this age of embedded journalism is to be pushed into taking sides when the situation calls for a firm, non-partisan assessment of objective realities." And that is exactly actually what the Asia Society strives to do, that is provide a non-partisan convening platform. And with 24/7 news broadcasting on television, reporting is seeing an era of post-truth politics, where objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotions and personal beliefs. Fake news is a growing concern as social media platforms continue to create new formats to circulate news to wider and wider audiences. And we now have 500 million people using the internet in India, so you can understand the impact of these platforms have. And just to get an idea of how you think, for our speakers, who are of course facing me as opposed to you right now, but I'm going to ask two questions of the audience. How many of you rely on social media and the internet as your primary source to access news? Come on, come on. That's not even 10%, really? Okay. Shall I ask that question again? How many of you rely on social media and the internet as your primary source to access news? Still about 20%. My second question is, how many of you have read or received news through WhatsApp or online which turned out to be fake? Wow, that's like 90%. So, okay. And before I introduce the speakers, and since I have you listening to me, I am going to say a few words about the Asia Society. We're a global not-for-profit educational institution with 13 centers around the world, the latest being Tokyo. And if you want to launch a book, we are the best place to do it. We have 13 places to take you around. And we work in the areas of business and policy, arts and culture. We use creative formats to present cross-disciplinary perspectives on Asian and world affairs. And what we hope to do is that through dialogue with leaders, academics, citizens, we explore vital issues facing Asia on the global stage. We want to create awareness and effect change. And we are a membership-run organization. So if you are not a member, we would really invite you to become a member of the Asia Society and have access to programs like these. And I'm just going to quickly draw your attention to Asia Society's upcoming programs. On September 17th, we have a special pre-release screening of the new film Manto with Nandita Das and Nawazuddin Siddiqui, and the tickets will be going on sale soon. And on October 1st, we have the president of the Asia Society Policy Institute, Mr. Kevin Rudd, who's speaking in Delhi about India-US-China relations. So do keep an eye out for our mailers. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers who really don't need much of an introduction. And Rajdeep Sardesai is an award-winning journalist and with 28 years of experience in print and television. And he's the author of now his third book. And as you all know, he's the consulting editor and lead news anchor of the India Today group. So welcome, Rajdeep. And Shaina, who is not here, is the national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party, for which she also serves as a member of the National Executive Council. And she's held the position of the treasurer of the BJP in Maharashtra since 2013, and she is the first woman to hold that position. So she is breaking many glass ceilings along the way. And Milind Deora is here, and he's the former Union Minister of State and Member of Parliament. And he was once a young parliamentarian, right? Entered the parliament in 2004, and he spearheaded the historic right to information law and e-governance, and also served as India's Minister for State for Communications and Information Technology and Shipping. And it's very nice to have his voice here this evening. And Naresh Fernandes is perhaps the first person I was ever introduced to in Mumbai. And so I count on him as a really old and good friend to the Asia Society. And you all know of him. He runs this marvelous online independent news, information and entertainment venture that focuses on the most important political and cultural stories that are shaping contemporary India, Scroll. And if you aren't getting your daily news from Scroll, I highly recommend you do. And I shouldn't be doing that, right, from this platform. So anyways, he's much beloved, and he's a long history as a journalist, but he was also editor of Time Out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Rajdeep to come and give us a few remarks, and then we will get on with the panel discussion. Rajdeep Sardesai.
Thank you very much, Bunty, for that very kind introduction, and thank you very much to the Asia Society for organizing this, and to my publishers at Rupa for helping organize this, but above all to Asia Society. And it's wonderful to be here in Mumbai and at the Nehru Center. The air is certainly cleaner than Delhi. The traffic is as bad, and we can compete between the two cities when it comes to traffic, particularly in the Worli area. But there is something about Mumbai that Delhi can never match, and that is the people. So it's wonderful to be among good people. No, I mean that. I mean that. I would not say the same thing in Delhi, trust me. If I was a true Delhi wala, I would say the same thing in Delhi. But I'm not. I'm a Mumbaikar in exile in Delhi. And it's my tragedy for the last 30 years now as a journalist, except for the 6 or 7 years I spent in Mumbai, to have spent most of my life in Delhi and tracking politics, which is not exactly energizing at the moment, but is still my job. And that's really what a newsman does. I'm just tracking what's happening in the world around me. I know we're running behind time, so I'm going to keep my opening remarks relatively short. 5 years ago, I finally got a chance to step out of a television studio room after being caged there for almost 20 years. And that gave me the opportunity to write a book, which I always wanted to. 2014, the election that changed India. Ironically, Naresh, who's here, he and I and a group of young journalists, young at that time, wrote a book called When Bombay Burnt, which was in '93, on the riots and the blast. But nobody knew us. There was no television, so nobody read our book. Which was very unfortunate, because I would really recommend it 25 years later. If you want to look back at what happened, and I believe, and I'm sure Naresh shares that view, the most traumatic months in the life of a journalist growing up in Mumbai was December '92 to March '93. Those 3 months were by far, for me at least, the most incredibly tough and emotional months to deal with. And that book, unfortunately, perhaps hasn't got reprinted, but was an important book, I think, at the time. So when I wrote the 2014 book, it was in the light of what I thought was a historic election. I know we call all elections in this country historic, but I do believe that if you look back in time, 77, when Mrs. Gandhi was defeated, and in a sense, democracy was reasserted in this country, and 2014, which really sees, according to me, the end of the Congress era. Whatever else happens from now, I don't think the Congress can ever return to the pomp of the 1950s and 60s when it was the natural party of power. And then to have the BJP become the majority party of this country, I thought made that election particularly historic. My idea was then to take 5 years off and write a book after the 2019 elections, depending on whether my thesis, the election that changed India, was right or wrong. But publishers can be persuasive, and they said, no, we want you to tell us something before the elections. I haven't predicted the elections in this book. This is principally a collection of my writings over the last 4 years. And I've used this period in a sense to draw on what's happened in the last 4 years, and maybe in a sense, therefore, offer a glimpse to the future. I've divided it into various elements. One is, of course, the rise of Modi. Let's be honest. Narendra Modi's emergence is something which has changed Indian politics, because, as I say in the book, he combines Indira Gandhi with Bal Thackeray. Because you have in him a politician who has a muscular nationalism, who is at times overtly populist, and is able to use these connections to build for himself a very large constituency which is almost hypnotized by him at the moment. And that is what every poll shows. His popularity is way above that of his party. There are states where the BJP's popularity is much lower. I was in Rajasthan the other day, and there's a very interesting slogan, Vasundhara teri khair nahi, Modi tujhse bair nahi. We don't have time for you, Vasundhara, but we have no conflict with you, Narendra Modi. But the emergence of this kind of a politician, I think, suggests, and its impact on government and governance, where unilateralism is increasingly the way government is run. I've decided demonetization is good. The Reserve Bank of India cannot raise a red flag. Or tomorrow I've decided surgical strikes are the way forward. We'll get the army to fall in line. Basically, I think that's the Modi model. Whether it's the right model for India, this excessive centralization, whether it's a mirror of Indira Gandhi with, as I said, elements of Bal Thackeray, is something which I think history will judge better than contemporary writers can. From there, you look at the state of the opposition. Because the rise of Modi and rise of Mr. Modi is not because necessarily just of what he offered, but what the opposition had to offer. And I think that is a problem that the opposition in this country still suffers from. They haven't been able to offer an alternative narrative, particularly of hope and change. We keep saying this is a younger country. What are you offering a younger aspirational India? Mr. Modi, whether you like him or not, has been able at one level to capture what I call the urban zeitgeist. He has understood what urban India wants in particular, a sense of belief that we've got to move forward. Whether we are or not, we don't know. But he offers the sense, and that in a sense is important. It's an illusion at times. As I say, he's a bit of an illusionist, as many good politicians today across the world are. From Erdogan to Trump to Putin, they all offer a hope of a better future, a strong Russia, a strong Turkey, an insular America, and maybe that's what he wants to offer Indians. And there are a lot of young Indians who are mesmerized. Every poll we do shows that Mr. Modi's support among younger Indians is almost double that as you go up the age group ladder. The opposition has not been able to offer a challenge to that. You've had the rise and fall rather dramatically of an Arvind Kejriwal. You've got Mr. Rahul Gandhi, who remains a work in progress. And no, he remains a work in progress, because I think he still has to, find his feet in this new world. This is a politics of take no prisoners. Modi, as someone put it, machine, media, and money, when aligned to a powerful politician of the kind that Modi represents, poses a huge challenge to the opposition. So the second part focuses on the challenge of the opposition. The third, and the one which I think is one which concerns me the most, is being anti-national in New India. This growing sense that if I don't agree with your view, I am not just a dissenter, but I'm anti-national. This belief that send them to Pakistan, as if visas are easily available. But the fact is, to expect union ministers to talk this language and to get away with it time and again should trouble all of us. When words are used so easily that so-and-so is an urban Naxal. If today you're a human rights activist fighting for people on the margins of society, does that make you an urban Naxal? And the Supreme Court will hear this tomorrow. But I do hope that they recognize that we cannot allow a society to be divided in this manner, where every day there is an endless search for an enemy. One day, and that's where the Bal Thackeray parallel also comes. One day it could be the Muslim, next day it could be a human rights activist, third day it could be a woman, fourth day it could be gays. You're constantly looking for an enemy on the basis of which you run and consolidate your political identity. And that, to my mind, in the long run, is something that should concern us all, particularly middle-class India. Because no one has been as intoxicated, as hypnotized by this rhetoric of them versus us as the middle class of India. People who are friends on WhatsApp groups are suddenly breaking away because you never know what your friend will now say on the WhatsApp group or on Twitter. The anonymity of Twitter suddenly makes all of us say things that we would have never said in the past. The fourth part is New India, because that is the dream which is being offered in the last 4 years of a new, better India. And I keep asking myself, it's not so much of new versus old, but whose India? Is it the India of this group that sits in the Nehru Center here, or do we go to Marathwada and look at the village woman who still has to go several kilometers for a pail of water? Just look at the per capita in consumption of water in urban Mumbai and compare it with what it is in rural Marathwada. One state, but two Maharashtras. And therefore the question I think should be asked is not new India versus the old, but whose India? And I think that question must, in a sense, be central to any political platform or public policy of the future. And the fifth and final segment is perhaps the one which all of us as journalists need to wrestle with. Media in a tele-democracy, as I call it. This world of television, which is where sensation has replaced sense, noise has replaced news, and chaos has replaced credibility. And what it has done to us as people. You've got television hyperventilating, and you've got Twitter and Facebook as your outrage factories. And the combination of that, to my mind, is creating an India which, to my mind, is getting far more polarized, hyper-polarized and divided than ever before. And I sometimes wonder why we became journalists. Did we become journalists to divide ourselves in this manner? Where even in newsrooms today, we are told you're prostitutes, you're news traders. When the Prime Minister of the country calls journalists news traders, or the Defense Minister calls us prostitutes, and our spine is so weak today that we can't stand up and tell him, sorry sir, that's not acceptable. As a result of which, increasingly the media is delegitimized in the eyes of many. Just like once Anna Hazare came and said, sab neta chor hai, today people say, sab media wale chor hai. Ya sab media wale nautanki hai. And partly we are responsible for our own plight. But the question that has to be asked is, what does this then mean? And this hopefully will be the basis for the discussion. What does it then mean for the future of democracy? If in a country where the media gets delegitimized so quickly, how are we going to actually see democracy in action? Who's going to hold the mirror and say the emperor has no clothes? Because now everyone is in PR. And everyone wants to say the emperor is well clothed. Nobody wants to say the emperor has no clothes. So we have a craven, and dare I say, increasingly divided media. And to my mind, that is a warning for the future of democracy in the country, if this is the media that we get. It's very easy to say you get the media you deserve. I don't think that's fair. I think the media must rise to the occasion. And therefore, that's where I end the book with a quick prayer to India. I'm just going to read a few lines from it. It's a rather long prayer, because I guess we live in an age where there's lots to pray about. But it's a prayer for India in 2019. It could be any year. 2019 simply because it's an election year. And it's apologies to the great Nobel laureate Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. Here is a prayer for my country in 2019 and beyond. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where every citizen is blessed with equal rights and opportunities. Not an India which is divided and discriminates on religion, region, caste, class, gender, and income. Where we keep religion out of politics and politics out of religion. Where we cast our vote but don't vote our caste. Where vote banks are replaced by an enlightened, inclusive politics that truly respects our diversity. Where secularism is about plurality and mutual respect. Where communal harmony is about celebrating Diwali, Eid, Christmas, Nanak Jayanti with equal fervor. Where a bhajan and a carol, a kawali and a gurbani are sung with gusto. Where our unique multiple folk traditions are a badge of pride. Where the periphery joins the mainstream, where from Imphal to Idukki, The state reaches out to the remotest corners of a vast land with equity and empathy. Where a Muslim does not have to prove his patriotism every time there is a terror attack in Kashmir or when a Lashkar chief spews venom against India. Where a Dalit is not shunned in a college hostel or a temple or a village well simply because of age-old caste prejudice. Where dignity of labor is respected, where manual scavenging is abolished in letter and spirit. Where Adivasi's forest rights are protected, where tribal land can't be acquired without consent and a just price, where a laborer is assured a minimum wage. Where individual freedoms guaranteed under the constitution extend to food, housing, marriage, where there are no fatwas or diktats, but where a Hindu can reject eating beef, a Muslim can stay away from pork, but neither will impose food restrictions on the other. Particularly valuable in a state called Maharashtra at the moment. Where killing in the name of the cow, just as killing innocents in the name of religion, must be seen of acts of terror that lead to speedy conviction. Where a Hindu-Muslim marriage is not seen as love jihad, but as an inter-community marriage based on personal choice. Where the right for free speech is fought for vigorously, but where hate speech and incitement to violence is punished. It goes on, but basically it implores young India to look for a new India, for a better India. In all this debate that we have of new India, old India, I think what we should be striving as Indians is for a better India. And surely this is the greatest country in the world because it is the most plural, diverse society in the world. And if preservation of diversity is not one of our foremost goals, then what else is? I'm sorry to sound here like a politician, but this book is about a newsman simply observing what's happening around me. And that's how I like to see myself. Thank you very much.
Shaina has just arrived, so welcome, Shaina. We did an introduction to you earlier. And I would like to now invite the panel to come up to the stage.
It's especially appropriate that we're participating in this event today, mainly centering around the media, since it's exactly 1 year since Gauri Lankesh was murdered in her home in Bangalore. There are a series of events going on across the country marking her life and work. And I'm glad that this is sort of appropriately timed. Over the past year, at least 5 journalists have been killed in India, reminding us that the attempt to tell the truth can sometimes come at a fairly heavy price. Rajdeep, it's just about 4 years since I moderated a discussion with you. That event focused on your last book, 2014, The Election That Changed India. And that title was truly prescient in an era in which we celebrate the energies unleashed by disruptive forces. Narendra Modi's transformation of national life has truly been profound, and India will have to deal with this influence long after he leaves office. Today, for the most, we're going to focus on what it's like to be reporting, broadcasting, and publishing the news in the Modi era, and to be tweeting, Facebooking, and WhatsApping it. I had one hint of how life was changing for journalists and journalism hours after I had that last discussion with Rajdeep. It was late in the evening of December the 6th, 2014, at the Goa Lit Fest, just outside Panjim. And since Rajdeep knows everybody, and especially everyone if they're from his home state of Goa, he realized that Manohar Parrikar was in town and invited him to the event. Parrikar was defense minister at the time, and before the discussion began, Rajdeep invited Manohar Parrikar up to the stage to release the book. We all stood in line, the flashbulbs popped, and all was well with the world. The next morning, I stumbled down to breakfast, and my friends told me that there'd been a social media storm overnight. I checked my Twitter account to find about 60 or 70 rather pointed messages. The first 30 or so contained a photograph of the event and messages berating Parrikar for allowing himself to stand on the stage with these 2 sold-out journalists who had absolutely no sense of decency and all of this kind of thing. The next set of photographs and messages surprised me even more. This set of messages demanded to know my Parrikar. This set of messages had the photograph with my face circled and demanded to know why Parrikar had been willing to be seen along with Taklu, as I was rather charmingly being referred to, who had wanted Ajmal Kasab to be freed. It took me a little while to figure out what was happening before I realized that a little while before this, I had joined hundreds of people the sort of people who you would now call urban nakshals, to sign a petition calling for the end of capital punishment in India. When Kasab was sentenced to death, this petition to the president was renewed, asking for his sentence to be commuted to permanent life in prison. That barrage of Twitter messages that night made a few things clear. One was that this was clearly an organized campaign. Two, because the messages came when India was asleep but New Jersey was awake, this campaign was being conducted by a foreign hand with Indian influences. And also that this foreign hand was clearly connected to a brain, even if a rather malevolent one. Somebody out there in the dark beyond had identified me from my photograph, found a petition I'd signed, and then spread around a distorted version of what I'd said. The only thing they'd miscalculated was the attempt to rile me up by calling me Taklu, which, and of course, boldness is a fashion statement that makes me irresistibly attractive to millions of people around the world, and the crowd in this room is testimony to that. Rajdeep, I wanted to start sort of on that note. In the 1990s in Bombay, we were pretty familiar with the threat of mob violence. For instance, attacks on Nikhil Wagle and Mahanagar by the Shiv Sena were almost annual events. And even when we worked at the Times of India, if you recall, one group had gathered outside to burn copies of the Illustrated Weekly because of an article that somebody had done on Shivaji. Is it really very different if the mob is attacking you online? And could you explain to the audience what it feels like when every single thing you say on Twitter results in an army of trolls coming back at you with vitriol and spite, simply because you're doing your job?
You know, Naresh, I should have mentioned this also, and I'm glad you did, that today is 1 year, and in about an hour or 15 minutes from now was when I remember the news broke that Gauri Lankesh had been shot dead outside her house. And that a woman journalist, well known in this instance, was shot in the heart of Bangalore is something that should send a chill down all our spines. Because I think that represented a moment where it was clear that it was not just online threats anymore, but those very online threats could translate into killing someone. And even worse was what happened after she died, where there were a lot of people out there saying she deserved it. Including, dare I say, people who were followed by ministers in the government. And that, to my mind, is what should trouble us. That if a journalist is shot dead because of what she allegedly represents in terms of her ideological views, and you will not have an argument with her, you won't write a book if you disagree with her book, but you will go ahead and shoot her, and then that gets sanctioned online and also offline through maybe political voices, it should trouble us. What even troubled me even more, Naresh, I remember we had a condolence meeting for Gauri 3 days later at the press club. And it was strange that the left leaders came there, the opposition leaders came there, and journalists who were seen to be anti-establishment came there. Almost as if we were divided even as a journalistic fraternity, even as the political class was divided. As I write in the book, a woman who had been killed for her views. And there should have been a greater sense of outrage, outcry, cutting across all the ideological lines. So I think actually Twitter or online is only mirroring what's happening around us. You know, many years ago, Nilkant Khadilkar, the old editor, Navakal editor, once said Bal Thackeray's great success was he was a loudspeaker of popular grievances. What you and I would not say in public, Thackeray would go out and say, everyone would say it in their drawing room. Now Twitter and Facebook, but Twitter particularly has provided those same people a chance to be mini Bal Thackerays, often under anonymity. Maar do isko, kaat do isko, tum anti-national ho. What else is it? It's providing a ventilator in a way for people to express themselves. And as journalists, I was initially taken aback by just the sheer ferocity of it all. Now I just accept it. And I just wonder if a list is prepared as it was the other day of 50 so-called urban Naxals and is spread around the country. And there are cheerleaders saying, yes, these people should be taught a lesson. What is the protection? As a journalist, I will never take any protection. That's for the politicians to take any protection they want. They can be X category, Y category, Z category. Good luck to them. Why should journalists have to be put under this kind of pressure for our writings? Please write a better book. If you don't agree with my book, please write a much better book. You don't agree with my movie, please produce a much better movie. So what is it that gives you the right to virtually use the gun on seemingly defenseless people? You know, it's very easy to say the pen is stronger than the sword. It's not. Gauri is silenced. And I think we all should ask ourselves, what is this culture of violence that we are encouraging online, which then gets transferred offline to the point where otherwise decent people end up saying terribly indecent things. And I hope that our politicians would come and stand up and say this is unacceptable. It cannot be the Prime Minister only once in 6 months. And it's not just the Prime Minister, don't make it about just Modi. There's a Modi model now. It's followed by Mamta, Naveen Patnaik, Nitish Kumar, Jayalalitha when she was around. They believed the media has to be silenced. They will not tolerate any criticism. That is the model. Actually, Maharashtra is one of the better states that way. Fadnavis has still not mastered the model in relative terms. But come across the country, Kejriwal is no different. He cuts advertising of newspapers who criticize him. Vasundhara Raje, Rajasthan Patrika, 28% of the viewership or readership of Rajasthan gets only 2% of government advertising. They had to eventually go to the court. So I think, it's a model now which increasingly uses online. These online armies are only used to spread hate and delegitimize the media. Eventually, we are all prostitutes today. It's a terrible word to be used. And to be used by a former army chief who very conveniently 6 months after retiring from the army joins a political party and then continues to give us moralize, about how we are prostitutes. I think it's an awful word to use, and that even people from Shaina's party do it is even worse. I mean, the Congress is also, the Congress brought the emergency. Yes, 1975. But generally, congressmen by their nature, and because Milind is here, I'll say it, and you might remember it. Deora, 1992 riots. You remember December 6th, we rang him up, it was a Sunday. Murli Bhai said, I'm playing bridge. I rang him up thrice, sir, I want your reaction. Finally, we decided that enough, we are going to put a front page. Murli Deora plays bridge while Bombay burns. Mr. Deora was very upset. He said, Badmash, ye, wo, sab. But a week later, he rang me up. 7 days gone, you have not come to meet me? That is an old style politician. An old style politician still understood that the media and he had a relationship. You could criticize him, but he would still share a cup of tea. Now you are the enemy. That's the worry. And that enmity, which is this them versus us, is one day going to destroy us till no one will be left, my friends. So today it was Gauri Lankesh, September 5th, 2017. I don't know who it will be in 2018.
As an aside to the bridge playing, we must note that Mrs. Deora just won a bronze medal at the Asiad for bridge.
And I told Shaina, she just came back from meeting Shaina's boss, the Prime Minister.
And we were on the same flight going to Delhi.
That's right.
But Rajdeep, to stay with you for a minute, you've alluded to the rhetoric that happens online. How does this play out in newsrooms across the country? What effect is this having?
Television newsrooms are simply an echo chamber for online. We are only looking at what is trending. I write about it in the book. A farmer's suicide in this country doesn't trend. So therefore, farmers' suicides do not make primetime headlines. Some politician saying something idiotic, especially about religion, will always trend. So,
Or about women.
And then you get yourself into trouble when you tweet about it. But look, that's the way it is. My sense is newsrooms today have lost their moral center. So newsrooms are looking for validation from online, which is a terrible way to be. What is making news today is not, you look at the newspaper, and that way newspapers to some extent have retained their integrity. Television has lost completely all sense. All of us have lost all sense of what is right and what is wrong. Every day most of us are coming on prime time with an agenda. Aaj ka mujrim kaun? Who is the bakra that I will catch? Who's the enemy? It's the old Bal Thackeray thing all over again. Who is that? One day it's the Gujarati, next day it's the Muslim, now it's the North Indian. Kisi ko to aaj pakadna hai. Who is that person whom I can target, who will then create a them versus us amongst us? Because we love polarization. We may deny it, but if you see a cockfight outside, you'll stop on the road. If life is calm, you won't. So you've converted a medium which should have been a medium of information, frankly, into a medium of infotainment with potentially disastrous consequences. Just to say that, look at India, Pakistan. My son's generation and daughter's generation is going up believing every Pakistani is a terrorist. And frankly, Pakistan journalists are braver than us. We only have online threats. They actually get bullets. My friend Hamid Mir was shot at and barely survived. And there are many others like him. But younger Indians are being told every Pakistani wants to nuke you. Every Pakistani is Hafiz Saeed. I remember sending a WhatsApp to Imran Khan when he won the election, and I have a good relationship with him. He said, and I, typical journalist saying, sir, when is the interview? He said, what interview? All of you have made me into a Bollywood villain. Because you are, all for you, Hafiz Saeed is the election. And Hafiz Saeed lost, he and his son, everyone lost deposits in all the seats they contested. But he said for Indian television for 1 week, Pakistan elections were about Hafiz Saeed. We are because Hafiz Saeed is the enemy. How do I make Imran an enemy? Not yet. I may make him one day. At the moment he's too, good looking or whatever you want to call him, charismatic. But Hafiz Saeed is the enemy. Yes, he is. He's the Lashkar chief. He deserves to be the enemy. But not every Pakistani is a Hafiz Saeed supporter. We cannot create a society based on enmities. One day it's Pakistanis, one day it's Kashmiri Muslim. Every Kashmiri young boy tells me he's a stone pelter. How are you going to deal with that? And I think politicians have to play a major role in sensitizing people, not just the media.
Can I just come in, if that's okay? I think that, what's happening in the newsroom is actually more than affecting the discourse in our society and in our country. It has a humongous impact on governance. And the one example that I'll give you, I know Rajdeep, you used to cover Parliament for so many years. Naresh, I don't know if you've been on the press gallery in Parliament. But I've seen with my own eyes, starting from 2004 when social media hadn't really taken off, when there was going to be hangama in the House, the press gallery is filled to the brim with journalists. They're almost falling over and falling into the House. I remember when we're debating the Right to Information Act, we're debating the Indo-US nuclear agreement, we're debating something of immense national significance. There's 2 or 3 journalists there. You'll find a small mention. And so I think, so Rajdeep, to take off from where you left off, I think you're right in saying that politicians have a responsibility, but if the discourse is being shaped on a daily basis by what's happening in the newsroom, and unfortunately it's become so sensational, it's become so bitish, in the sense that today, if someone is, as a union minister, I remember in 2013, we launched India's first national cybersecurity policy, which to me was a huge deal. I actually spent a lot of sleepless nights with my bureaucrats figuring out what we need to do to protect data privacy. A lot of that is actually going into what's becoming the data protection law today. But the minute we finished our speech in the event, and there were 30 or 40 cameras, the first question was some sensational random issue about something that happened 20 minutes ago. Like Shaina said, someone who made a comment against women, someone who said something against religions. Now, I'm not saying those are not important issues, but politicians, whether we like to admit it or not, we get distracted by these issues. And so I think we both, because both journalists and politicians have a very symbiotic relationship. You need us for TRPs, you need us for content essentially, and we need you for visibility. So it is cyclical, it is a sort of vicious cycle, which we both have to work towards to break. Because it's not just affecting the politics of this country, the society, but I really believe at the heart of it, it's affecting governance.
They got rattled. The difference between the Congress and BJP is between 2009 and 2014. They got completely rattled. All their ministers were looking at prime time and guided by what Anna Hazare was doing. So they got rattled. The good thing, one thing about Mr. Modi, he has decided, yes, sab media wale chhod do, I will speak directly to the public. I will go on Twitter, I will do my Man Ki Baat, I will do every other, I am going to bypass the media. Manmohan Singh, poor fellow, got rattled by it.
But can I just come in there? It's not rattled so much, Rajdeep, as just remember that we were the first party and the first government in India who had to face the twin effects of RTI and social media. And today, Narendra Modi and any successive government that will come in after 2019 knows what the pitfalls are with regards to RTI and with regards to social media. Both of these, in a sense, were unleashed by us. In 2005, we passed the RTI bill. A lot of the telecom revolution, which really took off from Vajpayee's era and during our time, that unleashed this new kind of discourse. So I wouldn't say we got rattled, but we really did have a sort of manual of how to deal with these two issues. And I think now going forward, any politician and any government is aware that you need to have a social media account, you need to have a Twitter account, you need to go out and get it verified, you know how to deal with RTI, you know how to deal with these issues that are coming up. So we were sort of in a state of shock. That's really what went wrong for us.
Shaina, we've been talking about the role of sort of journalists and our symbiotic relationship with politicians. Your party, on the face of it, doesn't seem to like us very much. You'll call us prostitutes.
Is that right? Do you like us?
News traders.
Do you like us is the question too.
What is the BJP's idea of freedom of the media, and do you see limits to this freedom?
I think there are 3 important points. Clearly, this is 3 versus 1, but the last comment Rajdeep made says it all. The last comment that Rajdeep says it all.
You have to get used to it when you're in power, Shaina. That's the price of...
We have a prime minister who truly believes in communicating, but with the electorate and the voter and Aam Janata, which is everyone sitting here and beyond. If you expect the Prime Minister to have cozy one-on-one meetings with people from the media, big magnets, that's not happening. And I think that is a very, very positive... Well, that could be your interpretation. I have many other interpretations to that. You have the Congress party that deliberately chooses not to go on a Times Now or a Republic TV for reasons best known to them. So it is our prerogative. Famous
interview to Arna, by the way.
It is our prerogative if we choose to go on a particular channel or a particular story, which is only about sensationalism. So I think the Prime Minister is doing what he thinks is best, which is governing the country, not wasting his time on petty conversations and controversy, but actually addressing issues which the public at large would want to know about. It's not as if there isn't a dialogue or exchange. And very conveniently, when the media talks about media and democracy, I'd like to ask a question. Who started actually selling media space? Is that not a prostitution of journalism and media? You're questioning a democracy and you're questioning our stance and suggesting there's some kind of a political play. I want to say the media has as much an agenda as do political parties. Political parties want to reach out to the voter. If there is a better platform through social media and direct connect, be it radio or addressing rallies, then so be it. The journalist is not being stopped from expressing him or herself. And if you choose to believe that Gauri Lankesh is the doing of the BJP, I think it's most unfortunate because organizations like Sanathan Sanstha have been banned. There are many times when not just the Prime Minister, but lots of leaders have said that no moral custodians of society will be allowed to function and everything will be in accordance with law. But people choose to dismiss sensible statements and only want to talk about who said what to whom, under what premise, and who should be banned, and who should be absolutely socially ostracized.
You were asking about the relationship, do we like you? There are a great many channels that do like you, and I think your party does a very good job of suggesting that the media is against the BJP. You need to turn on your TV channels every night, Republic, Times Now, and you get a sense of how much overwhelming affection there is for you. But among the things, among the elements that characterize...
Well, that's the mandate of the people too, so please accept it.
No, so I don't think it's fair to characterize the media as anti-BJP because it's clearly not. But among the elements that characterize Indian newsrooms today is fear. There are rumors about journalists being sacked for questioning the government line, of media houses killing stories because they fear they'll be raided. Even if it isn't true, it's had a chilling effect. It's led to self-censorship. This is not good for many things, including foreign investors who don't like this kind of thing. Isn't this something the government should be worried about, the perception that there is fear in the media? And what can you do about it?
Can I just put look, Naresh, it's not as if all of this started in 2014. Indira Gandhi has sacked editors. B.G. Varghese most famously was sacked for his comments on the so-called annexation of Sikkim in the 1970s. Go back in the 60s and 50s, media owners had to supplicate before the government for newsprint. The relationship has never been truly independent. And there has always been, and Shaina is not wrong, that there has been an element where media owners have been more than willing to compromise. Paid media has existed. No one doubts that. My worry now is that the brazenness with which it is carried out. The other day, a news channel, 9 p.m. news, was blacked out. Within a week of that channel's anchor putting out a story questioning the Prime Minister's Man Ki Baat. The news gets blacked out, the anchor gets sacked, the editor is removed. And the owners of the channel, who are a 100-year-old institution, so not some newbie, also accept it. Our news broadcasters accept it. We are, as L.K. Advani rightly said with the emergency, we are crawling when asked to bend. That is the truth of the matter. And the government knows where our backbone lies. You see, once you know where to catch the journalist or the media organization, withdraw advertisement. Ramdev is the biggest advertiser today on Hindi news channels. Withdrew his advertising of ABP within a day of that story appearing on the Prime Minister. I can understand government advertising being removed. What business did Ramdev have to get involved in it? You have effectively sent out a message. So it's, that's the brazenness with which it is done now is what say, and it's not just Mr. Modi. There is a Modi model which he has taken from Indira, which others are emulating him. Mamata Banerjee has done the same thing to newspapers in Bengal, and we don't say a word about it. So I think it's the cravenness which worries me and which should worry any right-thinking Indian citizen today.
So why don't you all follow the Ramnath Goenka model? I mean, I want to say that you have the power of the pen. You're entitled to write whatever you choose to. There's so many forums. You say publications don't publish it. What is social media? Write what you want. Express yourself. As my father always says, you can be a legitimate voice of dissent from within an organization, or for that matter, strongly echoing your belief. So I don't buy this argument to say, look at the fear, we're going to be shut down and we're going to be done away with. I mean, this is not some banana republic.
I am very happy to be the journalist chained in the backyard in my organization now. I'm very happy with it. That's not the problem. I worry about the institution. It's not about an individual. There's an institution called news media in this country. And the good thing is you cannot control beyond a point social media. The good thing is you cannot beyond a point control digital media. Given half a chance, you would control a scroll also. Let's be very clear. You cannot do it because of technology, and thank God for that. You can control me because you control licensing, you control advertising. We are big media. The Prime Minister, before the Economic Times Summit last year, withdrew himself from the summit 24 hours before the summit along with all ministers. And Chandrababu Naidu, who was then a member and was the main sponsor. They were all told to leave the event. Why? Because they were unhappy with the coverage of the BJP in the Economic Times on the UP elections. An election which you had just won with 300 seats. Look at the brazenness. Now, do you want to emulate Indira Gandhi? Then you should say so. You should openly say Indira Gandhi is our role model. I'll take that as an honest statement. She is your role model. Why don't you say that? Instead of saying, that we are actually standing for a liberal democracy, you don't stand for a liberal democracy. That's the reality. The harsh reality is you do not stand for a liberal democracy. It's nice to say you can be a voice of dissent. The fact is, you would love to have me sacked from my organization. That's the reality.
Oh, Shaina, will you respond to that?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't be here. I'd probably be.
So what do you think we can do?
Receiving end based on that false perception.
I know a minister in your government at the India Today conclave a day before said, if Rajdeep Sardesai is going to ask me the questions, I will not come to the conclave. That's the truth.
Shaina, what can we do to dispel this?
This is not about individual experiences.
What can we do to dispel the perception that this government is attacking the media?
I'll take less than 30 seconds because I know it's Milind.
But this is not TV, so we can take longer.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, TV trains you to say it in 30 seconds. But all I want to say is, you can express yourself. Your viewpoint need not necessarily be the viewpoint of the majority of this country. Even if you are the microscopic minority that has an opinion on us or our government, that's welcome. But if you are going to get into areas of creating a security threat for the government, and I wanted to come to Naresh's initial point where he used this word urban naxalism. This is not a concoction of the BJP. This is a connotation that the media has come up with. And when the police comes up with substantive evidence on few issues, whether it's national security or funding which is coming from Nepal and Manipur, or threats which are being meted out to general public and to the leadership, obviously we have to act. Does that make us popular or unpopular? I really think this is the only Prime Minister who has the political will to go by his conviction and to show his courage. And likewise, I say, why don't you have the same courage as a journalist to continue to write what you believe in? It's for this electorate and for the public to decide what is right and what is wrong. And if you ask, would we want to extend the olive branch? Completely on this forum itself.
Great. So the next time the Prime Minister gives an interview, we'll line up and hope that he gives it to us rather than Swarajya magazine.
But if I can say, I think it's important to also distinguish between a party's ideology with regards to curtailing free speech and individuals. I think to be fair to the BJP, for example, in 6 years of the Vajpayee government, and Rajdeep, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you saw the kind of hostility or the kind of relationship that the government has with the media today. So I think it really depends on person to person. But I also feel that this sort of environment of fear, Naresh, does extend beyond media. Today, we're in South Mumbai. When I talk to large industrialists, when I talk to industrial associations, I mean, they're so afraid to provide even constructive criticism. I mean, there's so many friends of mine in this audience today who are from a business background. Many of them privately criticize the government. They think the government should improve on some of its policies. But I can tell you they're so afraid to stand up and be counted. And I think that is unfortunate. And that's also comes back to the point, like Rajdeep said in his opening remarks. That
but the question is, are they scared for the right reasons or wrong reasons?
No, I think they're scared because they're afraid of massive harassment against them. A businessman is afraid today if I stand up and say that demonetization was wrong, it did not work. It may have had the right intent, but it did not work for the country and for the economy. My business could be shut down. I could be thrown off another committee. And to be fair, in 10 years of the Manmohan Singh government, we had a lot of businessmen criticizing us. I mean, Rajdeep had this bridge analogy of my dad. I remember when my father was a union minister, and Deepak Parekh, who's a stalwart of Indian industry, and he would play bridge every Saturday and Sunday at my father's home. And he would often write an op-ed against the government. But my father would just say in his own way, like, you Ullu, what have you written? I'm taking you to meet the Prime Minister day after tomorrow. Explain what your concern is. And so we had that sort of approach wherein, like you said, if a journalist has written something against you, how can we try and correct them? How can we try and educate them, enlighten them that what they've written is wrong? How can we tell businessmen that, okay, you're upset, what's upsetting you? How can we try and improve our systems? And therefore, I come back to my earlier point that why governance gets affected in all this is, like demonetization, I don't think the government has learned that demonetization, is willing to accept that demonetization was a failure. Partly because they're not getting honest feedback.
As Shaina said, this Prime Minister has a unique way of communicating that has never been done before. He communicates his Man Ki Baat on the radio, on Twitter. Why should he hold press conferences?
Why should he?
Yeah.
I mean, because it's not a monologue, right? So in a Man Ki Baat is a monologue. And ultimately in politics, politicians have to be held accountable. So when you're facing journalists and you're actually giving a press conference, when you're interacting with people, you're having an impromptu conversation, not a scripted conversation. It doesn't necessarily have to be a press conference. Today, I also think the sort of medium of press has evolved. Today, everyone sitting in this room who has a Twitter and Facebook account is the press. But can I, as a politician, be willing to say I'm not going to have a scripted conversation where, Naresh, I know exactly what Rajdeep and you are going to ask me. And can I leave it open to the audience to actually challenge me on something? And that's the kind of accountability you need. So in that sense, I think the Prime Minister has failed miserably. I think that he's failed to hold himself accountable.
Sonia Gandhi also never did that.
Having
he can say that. his party leader Sonia Gandhi also never had an open press conference.
And
in
Rahul
almost-
Gandhi tried and failed.
No, Rahul Gandhi, I will give him this. No, 1 minute.
I can tell you
I will
today-
give Rahul Gandhi one thing. He has taken in the last 6 months press conferences with no agenda.
Rajdeep, let
He's
me-
taken, once in a while let me say something good about your leader. You know, I wrote in 2014, I wrote in my 2014 book, Rahul Gandhi has never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. But I genuinely believe that in the last 6 months, Rahul Gandhi has done something unusual for an Indian leader. Perhaps he should have worked a little bit harder on explaining some of the points. You can't make statements in one-liners or 30 seconds. When you make major statements, RSS is like Muslim Brotherhood, you should be able to explain the statement. When you have a problem with agriculture, explain it. But unlike the Prime Minister, at least, he seemed open to taking questions. And I think as a journalist, for a democracy, that's important, to hold your leaders accountable. You know, Donald Trump, in the messy, chaotic manner in which he's functioning, I know we're saying it in Asia
I was going to
society.
say that, yeah.
You know, but at least Donald Trump is openly coming to press conferences and calling out CNN. Call them out. And in fact, in a way, CNN has also risen to the challenge. Look at the way the American media has risen to the challenge of Trump. And look at the way we have fallen to the levels that we have in the challenge of Modi. This should have been our moment to say, Pradhan Mantri, Emperor has no clothes. That's what we should do. The American media, night after night, is saying, Emperor, you have no clothes. And the Emperor is berating them, and it's a terrific contest, which makes America a truly great democracy. Here we are saying, Emperor is fully clothed, and he changes 4 or 5 times a day, but that's for another day. But we are saying that. And nobody wants to raise questions. You mentioned demonetization. Look at it, we do not even have a white paper. Forget about questions. Should this country not get a white paper on the most major decision that the government made in the last 4 years? Is that not the right of every Indian, particularly those who lined up? Most of us in this room didn't have to. I traveled this country and they were very happy. Please understand, Mr. Modi is the master. He made that out to rich versus poor. And one Maharashtra MP put it very well when I asked him what's the reason for Modi's success in selling demonetization. He said, you see, the Indian's attitude is, he's traveling on the road, uski bullock cart hai, bullock cart stops on the road. Par phir wo dekhta hai, Mercedes mein bhi puncture ho gayi hai. And he was delighted for a little while that he felt that the rich are also being taught a lesson. Mr. Modi converted demonetization into rich versus poor. But we need to have a white paper. This country should know what were the benefits, how was the decision taken? How could you bypass the Reserve Bank of India governor in the manner that you did? The man didn't have the spine to resign as he should have. And the country simply watched an institution being completely dismantled.
But Rajdeep,
That's my point.
The white paper is already out. I think the public knows
No,
the
that's
sort
the
of
Reserve
what
Bank.
really happened,
3
that
years-
RBI
No, that's
institutions
your-
were bypassed.
No, there
I
are.
think my limited
you
point
will only
is...
use what is positive about you will focus on the negative. There may be positives also. Let's put it all in the public domain. Our problem is we are now doing public discourses in this country without information. There is a complete denial of access to information. The number of RTIs which the government says can't respond to are just increasing all the time. We did one on Namami Gange. After 6 months, we finally got it. This flagship program, Ma Ganga ne bulaya hai. The fact is, the Ganga is just as polluted. Where's the money gone? Who's going to be held accountable for it? But nobody wants to ask the questions. Because when you ask the questions, then the emperor suddenly doesn't seem to have the clothes that we are told he has. And that's not just true of this emperor, as I said. There's a Modi model across this country. And it gets worse as you go into districts. I know my district journalists, the pressures they face from their MPs and MLAs. They are also Maharajas. They won't answer questions. They'll throw the mic at journalists. What do you then do? That's the problem.
Okay, at this stage, we will take questions. You can ask us anything except for our degree certificates. Put up your hand, we'll point to you.
And there's a few Saberites on the table.
Are the mics around? Okay, the lady there in red, please. Stand up,
also
tell
there's
us your name, please, since this is not Twitter and you're not anonymous. And ask a question, please. Let's not have comments. I'm very rude when it comes to comments.
Good evening, and thank you for the discussion. I'm Pia Mathani, and I'm an economist and author. Given the confluence of factors that Rajdeep mentioned in the context of what is confronting society, politics and media currently, are you apprehensive that we may be headed to a situation that can be probably described illustratively as feudal authoritarianism? I am apprehensive.
Yeah.
Thank
Who's
you.
the question for?
The panel, anyone in the panel. Are you apprehensive that we may be headed towards feudal authoritarianism?
You know, reports of the death of this country are always grossly exaggerated. You know, we thought when Indira Gandhi was in her pomp that she would never ever cede power. She was forced to cede power by the जनता बहुत महान है इस कंट्री की, बहुत बुद्धिमानी, not so much urban India, but जो गांव में रहता है ना वो जानता है कौन उसको कब बेवकूफ बना रहा है. And I'm not saying this in any other way, and again please don't misinterpret this, but I do believe that eventually in Indian democracy the people rise if they are taken for granted. No Indian likes to be beyond a point taken for granted, and that to my mind remains the bulwark of Indian democracy. And I am convinced therefore, Mr. Modi may be there for 10 years, 15 years, this country will eventually बड़े-बड़े लोगों को बहुत नीचे गिराया है, and they will realize that one day or the other. Arrogance in India is a double-edged sword. Today it seems hypnotizing. Tomorrow it may make you feel enfeebled. I remain apprehensive about institutions. Institutions in this country. I mentioned the Reserve Bank. Which governor of the Reserve Bank now will have the guts to stand up to a prime minister in the future is a question I ask sometimes. Which CBI, as was destroyed by the Congress party of Milind Deora, which CBI director today has the guts to stand up because you destroyed the CBI over the years when they were in power? Without institutions, and that's happening to the media, ma'am. Which mainstream, barring one or two media owners, how many media owners can stand up and look the Prime Minister in the eye and say sorry? Because media owners today have education schools, we have power plants, we are doing everything else but media. Why does India's largest media group need to hold an education institute and then go cravenly to Adityanath or earlier to Akhilesh Yadav looking for land? Why does India's largest Hindi media group need to get into the power business? Because the media business model is collapsing. If I was that, I would say, forget it. I am in public service. The great media organizations is what Jeff Bezos is doing with Washington Post. The Amazon man with all the money has said, go and build me the best newspaper I can. The problem is all our businessmen need the support of government. And because of that, they have a special relationship. And you know, TV channels, there are 9 TV channels in Assam, ma'am. 8 of them are owned by politicians and real estate barons. Do you expect them to have the guts to take on the Chief Minister of Assam? They won't. Of course it does. Absolutely.
Shaina,
we are in
would
the
you-
license Raj. Absolutely, ma'am.
Shaina, would you like to respond to that? One minute. Let's keep this to questions and not have any cross-questioning. All right. The gentleman in the front, in the blue.
Good evening, sir and madam. I am Parijat Shukla and I am working as a scientist. मेरा क्वेश्चन शाइना मैम से है. मैम, कुछ दिन पहले न्यूज़ आई थी कि आपको किसी ने स्टॉक किया, आपको या किसी और पॉलिटिशियन को. आई रेड इट, फिर उसको पकड़ा गया. कल मेरी अपने बच्चे से बात हो रही थी. मैंने जस्ट मजाक में पूछा, अगर तुम प्राइम मिनिस्टर बन जाओगे तो क्या करोगे? तो बोला, पापा मैं उनको बहुत पनिशमेंट दूंगा जो किसी लड़की को परेशान करते हैं. तो मैम, आप तो पॉलिटिक्स के बहुत ही ऊंचे लेवल पे डील करती हैं, प्राइम मिनिस्टर से भी आपकी मीटिंग होती होगी. क्या कभी ऐसा नहीं आता कि इस मुद्दे पे, जिस पर मेरे ख्याल से किसी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी को कोई ऑब्जेक्शन नहीं होगा, कोई पॉलिटिकल मुद्दा नहीं है, हम कुछ ऐसा कर सकें, ऐसी कोई पॉलिसी बना सकें कि हमारी जो औरतें हैं, लड़कियां हैं, वो सेफ होकर घर से बाहर निकल सकें? थैंक यू.
बिल्कुल सही बोल रहे हैं आप. और ये मुद्दा को लेके एफआईआर भी मैंने दर्ज किया और उनको सज़ा भी मिली है. तो मैं यही मानती हूँ कि जो आप एक हिम्मत दिखाएं तो देन इट्स पॉसिबल. If we just talk in the air and say that women should be safe, but women also need to complain where there is an atrocity या कुछ खराब हो रहा है. और आपको यकीन नहीं होगा, ये उत्तर प्रदेश के भारतीय जनता पार्टी के कार्यकर्ता थे, इसके बावजूद उनको सज़ा मिली.
The gentleman at the back. Who's got the mic? Okay, yeah.
My name is Akhilesh Fernandes. I'm a student at Government Law College. I had a question for Mr. Naresh Fernandes. in the age where we have a lot of fake news, false facts, we find that there are three distinct parties involved in the dissemination of the same. One is obviously, there is a political element to it. There is the element of the media itself. And there are the intermediaries, the private companies, your Twitter, your Facebook, your WhatsApp, who also have a degree of responsibility. So the question is, whose responsibility does it really become to ensure the prevention of this? Is it a combined effort of all the three, or does one party in this have a greater responsibility, to curb these fake facts and to curb these alternative news, etc.?
Yeah, in fact, often there's not a political party behind fake news. The most popular WhatsApp forwards are about miracle cures for ingrowing toenails or cancer or whatever. The greatest challenge we faced from fake news is this rumor going around about kidnappers, which has resulted in people being lynched across the country. So often it's not a political party specifically that's behind it. I don't really have an answer to what you're saying. It's a combination perhaps of technology, but also people who get things on their phones being much more discerning. Technologically, there are fact-checking companies now that will Snopes and all of these things that are trying to kill rumors. Both Facebook and WhatsApp are trying to figure out a way that if you are to get a message, it will immediately alert you to the fact that this information is suspect. I think it's a combination of many things. So Rajdeep has some ideas.
I just want to say that it's not as if, again, fake news started in 2014. Fake news is you can go back to the Mahabharata, like the Tripura chief minister often likes to go. And you could say that, Ashwathama is an example of fake news. Dronacharya had to be got out of the battle, so you say Ashwathama is dead. Eventually, it turns out that it's Ashwathama, the elephant, not. But the fact is, it now takes place in the age of technology and real time. And I don't know how you can stop it. How are you going to stop it? Let's be honest, this 2019 election is India's WhatsApp election. If 2014 was the election where the battle turned from the Maidan to the media, in 2019 it's likely to turn from the TV screen near you to the WhatsApp group near you. All political parties, and I know a friend of mine from the BJP social media cell is there, they are continuously 24/7 sending out messages.
We can only send 5 forwards now, unfortunately.
No, 5 but please, he'll correct me, 250. They showed it to me this time in Karnataka. They had booth-wise 250 people into 20. So they have to send it to those 20 groups of 250 people at that time. They'll now, of course, have to do it a little bit more because of 5. But they were doing it by constant. You were showing Rahul Gandhi with a beard doing namaz. One of their posters, देखिए Muslim है या नहीं, देखिए मुसलमानों को किस तरह से. Now you can't stop that. Who's going to stop that? Right? So one of them, and I'm sure there are equal ones about Mr. Modi as well that the Congress is doing. But the fact is, in this age of WhatsApp, and we are all hooked onto it. I mean, my mother at 76 seems to be obsessed with WhatsApp. I mean, I cannot understand. Educated people are getting into WhatsApp. It's a drug. Now, how are you going to stop fake news in that age, right? So in this age, it's going to change the way elections are fought. You don't need, the good thing is you may not need as much money as you did because communication, but the bad news is you can't stop, you can put all the gadgets you want. I don't think you can stop fake
Rajdeep,
news.
someone on my Twitter timeline said there's now bot news, which is BOUGHT news, and bot news, BOT news. So there are the two kinds of news now. But I think that, Naresh, if I can ask two journalists a question, both of you this question, since we're talking about how compromised easily, how easy it is to manipulate the news media, I mean, one thing that we always talk about is what is the sort of business model for a news platform? I mean, what is a sustainable business model that ensures credibility?
Elections.
Keeps it free of bias? No, seriously, I think that would be an interesting thing to talk about.
There are lots of people exploring lots of different models. Subscription, advertising, the traditional things that have always supported media. And as Rajdeep points out, events increasingly have become the model for some people.
But how sustainable is a model like The Wire or a PBS or an NPR? How sustainable is that versus a corporate-backed
Well,
media?
we'll have to hope that all these people out here subscribe to and put money behind the belief that independent media is something worth supporting.
You know, that's the worry. And that's going to get worse with time. Because the fact is, how are you, why do we have these conclaves sometimes? They're a revenue generation. And if the minister has to come to the conclave, I can't criticize him. Assume we are having a tourism conclave. Mr. Alphonse has to come. How do I criticize him for, let's say, whether the government has worked effectively in Kerala or not?
And if a PSU from his ministry has sponsored the event, it's even harder.
Yes, it is true. So there's an incestuous relationship. You're talking about business model today? The business model of television has completely broken down. The only guys who made money in the 25 years of the TV revolution are the cable operators. The cable operators enriched themselves. There were 4 cable operators who contested elections in Karnataka this time, which is the clearest sign that they've made money. Because in Karnataka, it was working entirely on cash. So, and that is a real question mark on demonetization. Only thing, the color of the money has changed to the pink 2,000 rupee note. But I have never seen as much of cash as was flowing in Karnataka. It made, clearly Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka now have set a standard. Tamil Nadu, at least it's centralized. So it goes straight to 1 or 2 people. But, given that, I don't know what the future of news is beyond digital, where I hope that subscription works, because if you pay peanuts, you'll get monkeys. I think India has to realize, India has to start paying for good news. Otherwise, we're going to continuously, endlessly debate like this and get nowhere. You pay 800 rupees to your cable operator for 900 channels. You're paying peanuts. You're getting monkeys. That's the reality. Sorry?
The lady
Naresh, I'll pick this one up. Good evening. My name's Mark Hannant. I'm a migrant to India who voluntarily came from England to live in Mumbai. My question is this to the panel. Is the government empowered or its position legitimised by the arrival of another muscular nationalistic leader who views the media as the enemy of the people?
Sorry, can you repeat that? We didn't hear it very well.
Is the government empowered or its approach legitimised by the arrival of another muscular nationalistic leader who views the media as the enemy of the people?
Are you talking about Washington or New Delhi? Or Ankara? Or Moscow? Or growing, but what you're raising is exactly the point that people are raising at the moment. The rise of the muscular nationalist is extremely seductive. Look, we have tried various systems. What is the argument that is given in India? 70 saal Congress ko bahut raj karne diya, they didn't do anything, now we must rule. That's the argument, and that's how, there's this brilliant new essay that's been written on Putin. And that's exactly what Putin is saying. I am going to revive the great Russia. And that's exactly what Erdogan says. These are the leaders of the future, because the young are, India's youth is aspirational but impatient. And they feel that the Congress party failed them. They're looking for this new illusionist. You need a hypnotist in the times in which we live. I just hope that the hypnotist is able to match his illusion with reality. Otherwise, again, going to be left feeling despairing. That's my view on it.
The lady there? Yeah.
Hi, good evening. I'm Brinda Lashkari, and this is a question for Mr. Milind Deora. Not being a Congress supporter completely, but I would like to ask you something. With this entire media going against the party, and for a layman, for example, a cab driver told me today that he's scared to step out as a Muslim because he thinks that azan reading and eating the meat that he wants is difficult today. As a politician, what would you suggest to the youth of today to break media completely? For example, see Scroll or Swaraj, see one magazine or the other. So my question to you is, what would you tell the youth to see media as? You see media as a platform as a leftist party, or as a platform to promote the rightist party, or as a neutral? Because media and politics goes hand in hand. So any suggestions from you, sir?
I think regardless of ideology and left of center, right of center, the reason I asked this question to Rajdeep and Naresh is I'm actually worried about how many people in India know how compromised the media is. I think it's like when you go to a store, to a convenience store, and you buy a can of Coke. You don't realize how harmful it is for you, how dangerous sugar is. Or it's almost like saying, 50 years ago when you would buy a pack of cigarettes and smoke, and then one day you realize that it was killing you. And I'm sorry to say this, but I think that's the analogy for the media today. So I think the first thing is, it's very, very important that there's awareness in society, that we have to remember, and Rajdeep has said this once, I think you said this at the Ramnath Goenka Awards once, that we have a business model. We are a for-profit company. Rajdeep, you can't hide behind your words now. And he said that, and he's right. So ultimately, for them to put content out, someone has to pay salaries. Someone has to pay for that content. Someone has to pay to source that content. Someone has to pay to distribute that content. Someone has to pay to curate that content. And I think that's at the heart of the problem with the news media in India or around the world. So I personally am more optimistic. As a former Minister of Telecom and IT, I strongly believe that social media, it's not that Twitter and Facebook are not compromised either. It's not that Facebook can't be manipulated, as elections have shown us. But I still believe that social media is a far more democratized way of curating information and accessing information for a layperson than media which is owned by a corporate interest or by any other individual. So I would say the future for media and for people who are consuming media looks bright. I just think that journalists and media owners who don't understand that, don't realize that the kind of disruption that they're going to face. And probably that's why Rajdeep is right, that they're looking at other business models. But I'm quite hopeful about the way information is being disseminated. I'm just a little concerned about how many people are aware about the difference between independent media and compromised media.
Okay, it's 8:30. We'll take one more question. The gentleman in the front.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Avik Singhi. Just alluding to a couple of comments which were made about the business model for media, etc., and the symbiotic relationship. Historically, the media actually played the role of granting access to the politicians. Over the last 10, 15, pick a number, that access has been taken away because of social media platforms and so on. So across the different roles that the media can play, access, respectability, infotainment, if that is the spectrum, it seems that it's bordering towards infotainment, and it's actually becoming media rather than news. If you look at the US model, where you have a Bezos who's cross-subsidizing or NPR, whatever, what could be the models for India? As somebody said, an informed electorate more often than not makes the right decision. And if I look at recent past, the schools or the education system has done a reasonably good job, let's say in, having people against Diwali, crackers and so on. So is there anything that you would say as a media person to do that and to have an informed electorate?
I think the model has to be, and which is why it was called the BBC News Service. News as service. News has to eventually accept its role that while it can try to have a profit model, at the core of news is a public service. Now, it's not going to be easy in the Indian context. I would love a gathering like this to do crowdfunding and say each one of you is going to put 1 crore and we get 1,000 Indians. Why not? You get 1,000 Indians. Look, how was Al Jazeera created? Al Jazeera has been created through the munificence of the Emir of Qatar. I'm sure there are enough rich Indians here in this room. 1 crore each, 1,000 crores. You'll get a quality channel. Keep yourself protected from any one individual having a dominant say in the functioning of a channel. That's as far as TV media goes. But I believe in a country like India, disruption is the only way. So I think the Naresh Fernandes scroll I think you've got to move into, the biggest thing in this country is the mobile phone. 450 million people have mobile phones, 200 million plus now are on WhatsApp with their smartphones. You're going to have to create a model for India. And Indians are going to have to try to spend for news. My biggest worry is we are so used to getting everything free. The BBC, at the end of the day, the British taxpayer is paying for the BBC. In America, CNN, 60% of its revenues comes from subscription, 40% from advertising. In India, 95% of our revenues come from advertising, 5% from subscription. So I'm dependent. Then I'm dependent, and the biggest advertisers are likes of Ramdev. The biggest advertisers are some PSU. If Milind Deora was the petroleum minister, I need to get Indian Oil to sponsor my event. I go to him. Immediately the relationship changes. Because politicians are, boss, they are carnivorous. Once they know that they've got you for a little thing, he will extract his pound of flesh. And he's right. I think the public needs to know we are terribly compromised. And therefore, I think we need to treat news as a service. If we can treat news as a service, as a public service, with contributions from people, possibly through new disruptive technologies, I think we'll have a model for the future.
Thanks, Rajdeep. Rajdeep needs to have his pound of flesh extracted. Please go out, buy his book. Rajdeep will be available to sign books, and in keeping with Milind's leaders' new gestures, Milind will be available for hugs. Thanks. Good night.